A small, tight-knit Appalachian town is shaken to its core when a beloved local teacher is found murdered in her home, stabbed 17 times with chilling precision. No signs of forced entry. No robbery. No fingerprints. But taped to her refrigerator is a cryptic, handwritten message. You should have stayed quiet. As investigators dig into her past, they uncover a dark web of secrets. A buried scandal involving a whistleblower complaint, a heated custody battle, and whispers of a student-teacher affair gone horribly wrong. Multiple suspects emerge: an ex-husband with a violent history, a jealous co-worker overlooked for promotion, and a former student recently released from a juvenile facility. But the deeper detectives dive, the more twisted the truth becomes. A series of anonymous tips leads nowhere, and one key witness vanishes without a trace. Was this a revenge killing orchestrated by someone she once exposed? Or is the real killer someone no one ever suspected? Years pass. The evidence grows cold. The victim's family still waits for justice. And the town remains haunted by the chilling notion: the killer is still out there, watching. It was supposed to be just another school night in Briar Ridge, Kentucky. But when the police broke through her locked door, they found her body sprawled across the kitchen tiles, and a handwritten note that changed everything: you should have stayed quiet. The rain came down hard on the night of October 19, 2017, soaking the quiet mountain town of Briar Ridge in eastern Kentucky. The leaves had begun to turn, a brilliant canvas of orange and rust. But for one house on Beechwood Drive, autumn beauty was replaced by horror. Inside that modest, single-story home, 42-year-old Elaine Tanner lay lifeless on her kitchen floor. She had been stabbed 17 times in the abdomen and chest, her arms bearing defensive wounds that told a desperate story of resistance. The weapon, a long-bladed kitchen knife, was still lodged between her ribs. Blood pooled beneath her, thick and dark, having already begun to dry. But the most disturbing element wasn't the violence itself, it was the note. Affixed to her refrigerator with a red smiley face magnet was a crumpled yellow sticky note. The handwriting was jagged, almost childlike, written in what investigators would later describe as purposefully sloppy script. It said, "You should have stayed quiet." Elaine had lived alone. Divorced, no children, her days were filled with lesson plans and community work. She taught 3rd grade at Briar Ridge Elementary, where she had worked for nearly 2 decades. She was well known, well liked, and by all accounts, well respected. That night, her friend and co-worker, Sarah Douglas, became concerned when Elaine didn't respond to texts or show up for their usual Thursday wine night. After repeated calls went to voicemail, Sarah drove to her home just before 10 p.m. The porch light was on. Elaine's car was parked in the driveway, but she didn't answer the door. Sarah dialed 911. When officers arrived, the house was locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no tripped alarms. After breaching the front door, what they found was unlike anything Briar Ridge had ever seen. Elaine's house was clean, almost too clean. No overturned furniture. No signs of a struggle beyond the kitchen. Her purse was untouched, sitting on the hall table with her wallet and keys neatly inside. Her phone was on the counter, the last outgoing message time-stamped at 7:18 p.m., sent to Sarah. Wine night's still on, right? Just grading papers now. The coroner placed time of death between 7:30 and 8 p.m. The note, that haunting message, became the focus of the case almost immediately. Its implications were chilling. It wasn't random. It wasn't a robbery. It was personal. Elaine had clearly known her killer. Investigators began canvassing neighbors, digging into her past and present. One neighbor remembered seeing a man in a gray hoodie walk up to Elaine's porch earlier that evening, but she couldn't make out his face. Could have been a delivery guy, she said. Or a parent. You know, a lot of folks drop by to ask about their kids' grades. Detectives found no package deliveries listed for Elaine that night. A week into the investigation, a list of potential suspects began to form. Elaine's ex-husband, Mark Tanner, had a rocky history. The divorce had been ugly, accusations of infidelity and financial manipulation. But Mark had a solid alibi. Security footage placed him at a sports bar in Lexington, 90 minutes away during the time of the murder. Then there was Rebecca Holloway, a fellow teacher who had been passed over for department head, a position Elaine had recently secured. School staff confirmed tensions between the two, but nothing that ever escalated beyond professional snubbing. Still, investigators interviewed her twice. Finally, an unexpected name surfaced. Landon Burke, a former student, now 21 years old. He had been expelled from Briar Ridge High in his senior year after allegedly threatening a teacher, Elaine Tanner. At the time, she'd reported him for an inappropriate drawing he submitted for a class project. Some said she overreacted. Others whispered he had a disturbing obsession with her. Landon had recently returned to town after a stint in juvenile detention and a failed attempt at community college. He lived in a trailer on the outskirts of town with his mother. When questioned, he appeared calm, cooperative, but something about him felt rehearsed. "I ain't seen Miss Tanner in years," he told police. "She made my life hell back then. But I moved on. I got no reason to hurt her." No prints of his were found in the house. No DNA. No fibers. Nothing. The case began to stall. Elaine's funeral drew hundreds. Her students made paper flowers. Her fellow teachers sobbed through eulogies. And yet, as the town mourned, fear simmered under the surface. A killer had walked into her home, left behind a message meant to terrorize, and vanished without a trace. Was it revenge? A warning? A silencing? No arrests were made. No new leads surfaced. The note was sent to forensic linguists and handwriting experts, but the results were inconclusive. To this day, the message remains as cryptic as the night it was left. "You should have stayed quiet." But quiet about what? When Elaine Tanner reported him, he lost everything: his diploma, his future, and some say his mind. Years later, he returned to Briar Ridge, just 2 months before she was murdered. Was it coincidence, or the final act in a quiet, simmering revenge? Long before Elaine Tanner was found murdered in her kitchen, she made a decision that changed someone else's life forever. In the spring of 2013, Elaine had reported Landon Burke, then 17, for submitting a disturbing piece of artwork in her creative writing elective. It was a graphic depiction of a woman being stabbed in the chest with the words, "Silence is peace," scrawled across the background in red. Landon claimed it was inspired by a horror film. Elaine didn't buy it. That report led to a school investigation. It turned out Landon had a pattern of erratic behavior, drawing violent images, isolating himself, even sending Elaine an anonymous Valentine's Day note with her face photoshopped into a wedding photo. It was the final straw. He was suspended, then expelled weeks before graduation. The fallout was immediate. Landon's single mother, Karen Burke, pleaded with the school board. "He's just misunderstood," she cried. "You're ruining his life over a drawing." But Elaine remained firm in her statements. "I feared for my safety," she wrote in the formal complaint. "He was fixated on me. I believe he's capable of violence." That comment, investigators later noted, felt eerily prophetic. Landon faded from Briar Ridge after that. Word had it he spent time in a youth correctional facility before bouncing between odd jobs in Tennessee and Ohio. For years no one saw him. No one even talked about him. But in August 2017, just 2 months before Elaine's murder, Landon returned. He moved back into the small trailer he once shared with his mother on Miller's Hollow Road. Neighbors said he kept to himself, worked nights at a local gas station, and never smiled. His presence unsettled the community, especially teachers at the high school. "He'd come into the diner where we'd meet after school," said Sarah Douglas, Elaine's friend. "He wouldn't speak, just sit at the counter and stare. It was creepy." When Elaine learned he was back, she mentioned it once, offhandedly. "Landon Burke's back in town," she told Sarah over coffee. "Just my luck." Sarah remembered laughing it off. "He's probably not even thinking about you anymore." Elaine hadn't responded. Detectives seized on this timeline. Landon's return to Briar Ridge aligned too well with Elaine's murder. He had motive, revenge. He had opportunity, he knew where she lived. And if he still harbored resentment, this crime was practically a script pulled from his old drawings. But they had a problem. No physical evidence. Landon had no criminal record beyond the juvenile incidents, and he provided an alibi for the night of the murder. He claimed he worked a 6 to 10 p.m. shift at Holloway Fuel Stop. His manager confirmed his clock-in time. Surveillance showed him at the register at 6:03, 6:48, and again at 9:56. Still, gaps remained. What if he clocked in and left for part of the shift? What if he had help? When detectives pressed him on Elaine's death, Landon's demeanor was cool, almost calculated. "I had no reason to go near her," he said. "She already took everything from me once. I moved on." But his version of moving on painted a troubling picture. A search of his home turned up dozens of drawings, many resembling scenes of women being attacked or silenced. One showed a woman stabbed in a kitchen, eerily similar to the crime scene. It wasn't proof, but it wasn't nothing. Then came the biggest red flag. In a notebook dated just weeks before the murder, detectives found a single sentence written repeatedly across an entire page. "You should have stayed quiet." Just like the note at the crime scene. But Landon claimed it was song lyrics. "It's a line from a demo I was writing," he told them. "It's just words. You think if I really killed her, I'd keep a diary about it?" The handwriting was compared to the note left on Elaine's fridge. Analysts said it bore possible similarities, but not enough to be conclusive. It wasn't the smoking gun investigators had hoped for. And then, just days later, Landon's lawyer stopped all questioning. The search of his trailer yielded no murder weapon. No blood. No fibers. No trace DNA. Without hard evidence, the DA declined to press charges. Landon walked free. The town buzzed with anger. Sarah Douglas publicly called out the investigators on Facebook. "We all know who did this. And if no one stops him, he'll do it again." The post went viral in the local community, but it didn't change the facts. Landon was never arrested, never charged. Elaine's murder remained technically open, but quietly resources were pulled back. Leads went cold. To this day, Landon Burke still lives just 6 miles from where Elaine Tanner died. He rarely speaks. He never gives interviews. And when reporters try to contact him, he simply says, "I already told the truth. People just don't want to hear it." Maybe he's right. Maybe he's lying. Maybe he got away with murder. Or maybe the real killer hasn't even entered the story yet. She was respected in the classroom, but behind closed doors, Elaine Tanner made enemies in high places. Secret complaints, bitter rivalries, and a buried scandal no one dared to speak of, until after she was dead. For the people of Briar Ridge, the murder of Elaine Tanner felt personal. But for the staff of Briar Ridge Elementary, it felt dangerously close. The morning after Elaine's body was discovered, the school operated on a skeleton crew. Her classroom sat untouched, decorated with fall leaves and handwritten assignments still pinned to the corkboard. The words "Miss Tanner's room" were still neatly printed on the door. But inside the teacher's lounge, tension brewed. No one wanted to speak too loudly. No one wanted to say the wrong thing. But they whispered. And in those whispers, a very different Elaine Tanner began to emerge. She could be harsh, one teacher confided anonymously. She had favorites, and if you crossed her, you were dead to her. Others nodded. Elaine played the politics game well, said Greg Morton, a 4th grade teacher. She knew how to get on the principal's good side. She made sure she was seen as the golden girl. But not everyone liked how she got there. The first public crack in her perfect image came with the promotion scandal. Earlier that year, Elaine had been selected for a coveted administrative position, lead instructional coordinator, a role that many believed was promised to Rebecca Holloway, a veteran teacher with a master's degree in curriculum design. According to staff, the selection came down to the 2 women, and Elaine won. Rebecca was furious. She stopped talking to Elaine entirely, said one teacher. Refused to sit near her in meetings. You could feel the hatred. Investigators had already interviewed Rebecca Holloway during their first sweep of suspects, but her story was airtight. She had been visiting her mother in Louisville on the night of the murder, complete with highway toll records, gas station footage, and a time-stamped purchase at a Walmart 90 miles away. Still, her bitterness lingered. Some colleagues said she cried when she heard about Elaine's death. Others said she laughed. Then came a deeper revelation, one that wasn't in the official reports. Elaine had filed multiple internal complaints over the past 5 years. According to a leaked memo, she had submitted at least 3 formal HR statements accusing coworkers of unethical behavior. One involving falsified student assessments, another involving inappropriate classroom relationships, and a third that was heavily redacted, except for one line. If this is not investigated properly, I fear retaliation. That line now read like a prophecy. The school board wouldn't say who the complaints were about. They cited confidentiality. But teachers whispered it had to do with Mr. Denny, a longtime staff member who resigned abruptly just months before Elaine's death. Rumors swirled that Elaine had caught him texting a student after hours. Police attempted to track him down, but he had moved out of state. Interviewed once over the phone, he claimed no connection to Elaine's death. That school ate itself from the inside, he said bitterly. I'm not surprised she ended up dead. But it wasn't me. While most of the staff chalked up Elaine's complaints to moral high ground, some believed she enjoyed the power. She liked the drama, one said. She liked knowing secrets. But secrets make enemies. And enemies, it turns out, may have known more than they let on. A week after Elaine's funeral, an anonymous envelope arrived at the Briar Ridge Police Department. Inside was a typed message. No fingerprints. No return address. Read, "You're chasing shadows. Look inside the school." That's where the blood started. The note reignited interest in Elaine's past at the school. Detectives re-interviewed staff, requested school records, and tried to match the anonymous tip with any known suspect. But like everything in this case, it led nowhere. What did "where the blood started" mean? Detective Aria King, one of the lead investigators, believed it was metaphorical. "She made enemies here," King said in a press statement. "Not just one. Multiple. The note may not be literal, but it reminds us this wasn't a random act. Someone wanted Elaine Tanner silenced. But then there was the question of why now. Elaine had taught for nearly 2 decades. If the motive was rooted in a school conflict, why wait until 2017? The answer may lie in her most recent email, sent just 3 days before she died. The subject line read, "Statement of concern, urgent." In the body of the message she wrote to the school board, "I'm not backing down. I have documentation and I intend to speak at the next town meeting unless this is addressed. I will not be intimidated into silence." The email was timestamped October 16th, 7:12 p.m. 3 days later she was dead, stabbed 17 times, and silenced. The police requested access to the attachments she referenced, but the school board claimed the email server had automatically deleted the files due to a corruption error. No backup was ever recovered. Whether it was sabotage or coincidence remains unknown. Elaine's last stand, whatever truth she was about to reveal, died with her. And the whispers in the teacher's lounge continue to this day. About Elaine. About the secret. About the killer who may be hiding in plain sight. Because one thing is clear. In Briar Ridge people talk. But no one dares talk too loud. She claimed she saw a man leave Elaine Tanner's house the night of the murder, nervous, soaked, and limping. But just days before giving her full statement, she disappeared without a trace. It had been exactly 11 days since Elaine Tanner's murder when police received a call that would crack the case wide open, if only briefly. The caller was Delilah Moss, a 57-year-old part-time waitress at Ronnie's Diner, located just 4 blocks from Elaine's home. Known around Briar Ridge as Miss D, she was well-liked, sharp-eyed, and deeply connected to the neighborhood's daily rhythms. That morning, Delilah phoned the local sheriff's office and calmly said, "I didn't want to get involved before, but I saw something that night. I think it matters." Detectives rushed to speak with her. What she described was the first eyewitness account of anything resembling a suspect. Delilah told officers that at approximately 8:05 p.m. on the night of October 19th, the estimated time of Elaine's death, she was sitting on her porch with a cigarette, watching the rain come down in sheets. Her home, positioned on a slightly elevated ridge, had a view of Beechwood Drive, though partially obscured by trees. She said she saw a figure walk hurriedly down the street from the direction of Elaine's house. A man in a gray hoodie, soaked to the bone, limping slightly, and glancing over his shoulder as he disappeared toward the gas station. It wasn't a jog, she said. It was a getaway walk. Quick but not panicked, like he knew no one would stop him. Police were stunned. Delilah's description eerily matched what another neighbor had vaguely mentioned days after the murder, but that neighbor hadn't been sure of the time, or the direction the person came from. But Delilah? She was confident. "I remember because it was right after my show ended," she told detectives. "I turned off the TV, lit a smoke, and there he was." Police asked her to come to the station the next day to give a formal statement and assist with a sketch. Delilah agreed, but she never showed up. When detectives returned to her home the following afternoon, she was gone. Completely. Her house was locked, her car parked neatly in the driveway, but her cell phone was on the kitchen table and her purse still on the couch. Her dog, a small terrier named Max, had been left alone, unfed. The lights were on, the TV still buzzing static. Delilah Moss had vanished. Within hours, the town descended into panic. Social media exploded with speculation. Was it connected to Elaine's murder? Had the killer silenced a second witness? Sheriff's deputies and volunteers launched a full-scale search. Bloodhounds tracked her scent to the edge of the woods behind her home, but lost it after 200 yards. A neighbor's security cam captured blurry footage of what appeared to be Delilah walking toward the treeline around 11 p.m. the night before her disappearance. She was barefoot, wearing a nightgown and holding a flashlight. Some believed it looked like she was following someone. Others weren't convinced she left willingly. No signs of struggle. No ransom. No known enemies. Just gone. Rumors spiraled. Some said she was silenced by the same person who killed Elaine. Others believed she made up the sighting for attention and ran when the pressure mounted. A darker theory emerged, that Delilah knew exactly who she saw that night, and that confronting them had cost her everything. Her disappearance became a case of its own, though always linked back to Elaine Tanner's murder. The local news dubbed her the vanishing witness. But here's where the case took an even stranger turn. 2 weeks later, on the edge of Danbury Creek, searchers found Delilah's flashlight, wedged between rocks, its battery long dead. Nearby, partially buried in mud, was a single torn page from a notebook, soaked and faded. Investigators dried and analyzed the paper. In block letters it read, "I know what I saw. And I know who he is." There was no name. Handwriting analysts could not determine if the note belonged to Delilah. No confirmed handwriting samples existed for comparison. But the implications were haunting. If Delilah had seen the killer, who was he? And what did he do to her? Theories flooded in. Some returned to Landon Burke, especially after the detail of the limp. Years ago, Landon had suffered a serious ankle injury in a motorcycle accident. He was known to favor his left side when tired or under strain. But police re-examined the Holloway fuel stop footage. Landon was visible on camera at 8:09 p.m., handling a transaction. If Delilah was right about the time, 8:05 p.m., that left a narrow 4-minute gap, which made it unlikely Landon could have left Elaine's house and arrived at the gas station that quickly, even on foot. Unless the cameras were wrong. Or someone helped him. Then again, what if Delilah saw someone entirely different? A new figure emerged from school records. A former janitor named Miles Huxley, terminated in 2015 for inappropriate comments made toward Elaine and another female staffer. He had a history of petty crime and had been seen in town a month before the murder. Police couldn't locate him for questioning. It was another loose thread in a case unraveling with more questions than answers. To this day, Delilah Moss has never been found. No body. No solid evidence. No closure. Her porch still stands empty now. The swing creaks in the wind. Her terrier, Max, was taken in by a neighbor and now curls up by the door at sunset, waiting. Waiting for someone who may never return. And as the town of Briar Ridge holds its breath, the message becomes chillingly clear. The closer you get to the truth in this case, the faster you disappear. The note said, "You should have stayed quiet." For years, everyone assumed it was a warning to Elaine Tanner. But new evidence suggests the message wasn't meant for her at all, and the real target might still be alive. For nearly a year, the investigation into Elaine Tanner's brutal murder had hit nothing but walls. Witnesses disappeared. Leads ran dry. And the only physical clue, the chilling note taped to her fridge, remained maddeningly ambiguous. You should have stayed quiet. It was sinister, intimate, and deeply personal. But it was also vague. From day one, detectives assumed it was directed at Elaine herself. An act of vengeance for something she said, something she exposed. But in late September 2018, a new theory surfaced from the least expected place. A true crime podcast. The episode, titled Silent No More, The Tanner Case Revisited, had been produced by local journalist Grace Hollis, who had grown up in Briar Ridge and knew many of the people involved. Grace had secured rare interviews with former students, teachers, and even a cousin of Elaine's who hadn't spoken publicly. But what caught national attention was the theory she floated in the final 10 minutes. What if, Grace asked, the note wasn't meant for Elaine at all? What if the killer left the message for someone else? Someone who was supposed to find it? And Elaine was just collateral damage. It was a shocking idea. And at first, many dismissed it as podcast dramatics. Until Detective Aria King decided to take a second look. Re-examining the crime scene photos, she noticed something that had always seemed like background detail. On Elaine's kitchen table, beside her laptop, was a neatly stacked folder labeled Brandy, Custody Notes. Brandy was Brandy Wilkins, a former student of Elaine's and someone she had mentored for years. Brandy came from a troubled home. A father in and out of jail, a mother with substance abuse issues, and 2 younger siblings she practically raised. In 2016, Brandy turned 18 and applied for full custody of her siblings. Elaine wrote a glowing letter of support and helped her navigate the court system, attending hearings, even going so far as to offer to serve as a character witness. The last anyone had heard, Brandy had moved to Lexington with the kids. But now she was suddenly relevant again. Detectives tracked her down. Now 21, Brandy was living under a new name, Brandy Easton, and working as a legal assistant. When investigators asked why she changed her name, her answer stunned them. "Because I was being followed," she said. "After Miss Tanner died, things got weird. Someone left a note in my mailbox. It said, "One voice ruins it all." I moved the next week. I never looked back. Brandy hadn't told anyone, not the police, not even her boyfriend. She feared it was related to her father, Calvin Wilkins, who had been released from prison the same year Elaine was killed. Calvin had long hated Elaine. Back in 2015, she had reported him for verbally abusing Brandy during a parent-teacher conference. That report had been cited in his parole denial the following year. According to Brandy, he blamed Elaine for turning his daughter against him. Now, a terrifying picture began to emerge. Elaine Tanner had filed a series of statements on behalf of Brandy during the custody case, including claims of domestic abuse, verbal threats, and allegations of childhood neglect. If Calvin had discovered those documents, and believed Elaine was solely responsible for his daughter's defiance, it could explain the rage behind the murder. But it didn't explain the note. Until investigators found this. Buried in Elaine's home printer tray was a draft email addressed to Brandy. Read, "I found the old letters. I'm sending scanned copies your way in case you need them again. Don't worry, I've got everything backed up. Don't let him silence you." The timestamp? 7:14 p.m. Elaine was murdered less than 30 minutes later. Detectives now believe the killer may have come to Elaine's house expecting to find Brandy, or intending to send her a message. The phrasing, "you should have stayed quiet," could have easily been meant for Brandy, not Elaine. Elaine tragically was simply the messenger. The new theory reignited the investigation, and attention turned immediately to Calvin Wilkins. But they hit a roadblock. He had died in a car accident 6 months earlier while driving through the Smoky Mountains. The crash was ruled accidental. He had never been questioned, never even considered a suspect. And with him, any confession, or denial, died on the highway. Yet questions remained. Was Calvin acting alone? Or had someone helped him? Delilah Moss, remembered now as the woman who may have seen too much, lived just 2 blocks from the old Wilkins residence. Could she have recognized him that rainy night? And what about the second note Brandy received? One voice ruins it all. Was it Calvin, or someone else still out there, still watching? Brandy has since moved again. She lives under a pseudonym in an undisclosed location. Her siblings remain under her care. She declined further comment for this story, but her last message to police read, "I don't think it's over. Whoever left that note at Miss Tanner's, they didn't just want her gone. They wanted to send a warning. And I heard it loud and clear." Years after Elaine Tanner's murder, a dusty box hidden in a school basement revealed what she was about to expose. A file that connected multiple staff members, a dangerous cover-up, and a second victim no one had even realized was missing. For over 5 years, the murder of Elaine Tanner had loomed over Briar Ridge like a storm cloud that never passed. Memorials were held. Tips dried up. Suspects faded into obscurity. And still, the words on that yellow sticky note haunted every unanswered question. "You should have stayed quiet." But in the fall of 2022, everything changed, because of a janitor, a leaky pipe, and a box that was never meant to be found. During a routine renovation at Briar Ridge Elementary, maintenance staff discovered flooding in a rarely used storage room in the basement, an old archive once used for housing outdated textbooks and district records. The room had been sealed off for years. When janitors cleared the area, they found a warped cardboard box tucked behind a collapsed shelf. Inside were dozens of personnel files, handwritten disciplinary records, and folders marked "Confidential, Staff Only." At the very bottom was a red folder labeled, "Do not discard, E. Tanner/pending review." The district superintendent, now in his second year on the job, turned the entire box over to the Briar Ridge Police Department. What they found inside reopened the case in an explosive way. The red folder contained documents that Elaine Tanner had quietly compiled over several years. Student statements, parent complaints, and internal memos. But the most damning piece was a sealed complaint she had filed just 3 weeks before her murder. It accused 3 current and former staff members of participating in or covering up systematic abuse of students with learning disabilities, including physical intimidation, verbal degradation, and falsification of IEP, Individualized Education Program, reports to minimize classroom support. Among the names listed, Rebecca Holloway, veteran teacher passed over for promotion. Miles Huxley, former janitor who was never fully investigated. Greg Morton, the friendly 4th grade teacher who had seemed cooperative throughout the investigation. But most disturbing was an attached statement from an anonymous former student known only as JD, who claimed that a friend had gone missing in 2016 after repeated altercations with one of the accused. Elaine had written a personal note attached to JD's report. "I believe this child may have witnessed something serious. If anything happens to me, look here." That line had never been seen by investigators before. Now they had motive. And not just one. Detectives immediately questioned Greg Morton again. His previous cooperation turned to cold detachment. He denied everything, claimed he had never seen the red folder, and accused the district of trying to bury its own failures by making him a scapegoat. But the investigators weren't done. One of Elaine's handwritten notes in the folder included a startling timeline. A list of teachers, students, and suspicious incidents dating back to 2013. Among them was a name no one had mentioned in this case before. Jamie Daniels, a student who had been in Elaine's 5th grade class. Records showed that Jamie had transferred schools midway through the 2016 school year, but had never enrolled elsewhere. He simply vanished from the system. No truancy report. No follow-up. Just gone. Investigators tracked down Jamie's mother in a nearby county. She wept when they arrived. "You're the first people to ask about my son in 6 years," she said. "After what happened at that school, I kept quiet. I didn't think anyone would believe me." She explained that Jamie had come home bruised one afternoon and refused to go back to school. He told her a staff member had locked him in the boiler room for speaking out. Days later, Elaine contacted her directly, promising to help. Then Jamie disappeared. She assumed he had run away. But now, with the resurfacing of Elaine's notes, investigators began to wonder, had Jamie witnessed something he shouldn't have? Had he been silenced? A renewed search of Briar Ridge Elementary grounds turned up nothing. But what it did turn up was fear. Staff began resigning. One of the former administrators refused to cooperate and lawyered up. Another fled the state. The community turned inward again, this time in shame. Elaine Tanner hadn't just died because she poked the wrong person. She died because she was trying to expose an entire system of abuse, and the web reached far beyond anything police imagined. The theory now. Elaine had gathered everything. She was days away from making it public, either at a town hall, through the media, or possibly to state investigators. She had backed up the files, printed copies, and hidden evidence in her home, on her laptop, and perhaps in Brandy's custody case as added insurance. The killer, whether it was someone she named or someone working with them, acted fast. Delilah Moss likely saw that person leaving the scene. Brandy may have been the real target of the message, or the next one. Jamie Daniels may have been the first. But despite this mountain of information, no arrests were made. Why? Because so much time had passed. Because evidence had degraded. Because witnesses were gone. Because people were scared. And in small towns like Briar Ridge, fear has a long memory. To this day, the case remains officially unsolved. Elaine Tanner is remembered each year by her former students at a candlelight vigil outside the school. A plaque was installed on the front lawn. She lit the way for others. Even when it cost her everything. The sticky note that once taunted police now sits in an evidence locker, its message more complex than ever. You should have stayed quiet. But Elaine didn't. And because of her, the silence was broken. She was a teacher, a protector, and a voice for those who had none. And in trying to expose the truth, she paid the ultimate price. Years have passed, but the questions haven't faded. Who killed Elaine Tanner? What happened to Delilah Moss? And how many more secrets still lie buried beneath Briar Ridge Elementary? If someone you loved were silenced for speaking out, would you stay quiet too? The case remains unsolved. But maybe, you hold a piece of the puzzle. And if Elaine's story moved you, don't let her voice die in silence. Share this video. Subscribe for more real-life mysteries. And join the community keeping these stories alive. Because the truth doesn't bury itself forever. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and stay loud.